Alright everyone, we start off today talking about Liz Cheney. Now I'm going to deviate slightly because of course she's a war pig neocon and stuff, so I'm glad she's embattled and probably on her way out. But actually she's not doing the job that a person in Congress is meant to actually do. And her federal level grandstanding is funny because it's like the inverse of Joe Manchin, and so I'm going to try to explain that. First and foremost, though, if you're watching this video on YouTube, there will be a pinned comment down below with links to 4 other video hosting sites that I use. Keep in mind, I make 4 videos a day, only 2 of them end up on YouTube. There will also be a link to my Substack. I've started using them. I put up a new entry today. Tomorrow I'll put up an entry probably, but then after that first 7, like the first week, I'm going to slow it down to 1 or 2 entries a week or so. I don't know, I tend to fire on all cylinders sometimes and become a workaholic, and then I'll write like 5 articles in a go or something. I do this with editing. I do this with videos occasionally. But I'll try to keep your email from getting overloaded with Styx Hexendom in addition to your notifications on all these other sites. Now here's my read of this. People in Congress, whether it's the House of Representatives or the Senate, fundamentally the purpose of that position is to represent a constituency. Liz Cheney is from Wyoming. The Wyoming constituency does not approve of her. Her approval is in the 20s at the moment, or the low 30s at best. She is widely disapproved of. She's not loved by the Republican Party at large because she crossed lines and decided to go along with the Democrats' big lie. It's funny because the concept of a big lie a la Trump is actually itself a big lie. It's propagandistic nonsense. Of course, Trump never attempted to stoke up an insurrection. Trump never attempted to overthrow the government. There was a riot at the Capitol that was only loosely connected to the gathering that he had held at the time. And it's funny because actually I'm sure he wished that it hadn't happened because, of course, otherwise the news of the day would be Trump had 10, 20 times as many people show up as Joe Biden did on the same day, and it would have been very, very funny. It would have been the ultimate slap in the face to Biden. I almost think there might have been agent provocateurs that were trying to get people to riot at the Capitol. But here's the thing. A senator or a representative has no other purpose other than to represent a constituency of people. It's not the national platform. Liz Cheney is not hired to represent Republicans in California or Republicans in Alabama. She represents Wyoming. She represents the state of Wyoming. Senators initially represented state legislative bodies. They were appointed by the state houses. And then the people in the House, of course, they represent a district. Liz Cheney is doing neither. The people of Wyoming overwhelmingly supported Donald Trump in the election, still overwhelmingly support him. It's a very, very red state. It's obvious that they prefer the populistic side of Republican policies. You're seeing this especially in more rural red states. As opposed to maybe even like a Texas or a Florida or something, you're seeing huge amounts of support among the rural working and middle class, farmers, entrepreneurs, and so forth, people who are kind of off-grid. That's a huge core of support for Donald Trump. We're talking many tens of millions of politically aware Americans. They don't approve of Liz Cheney. She has no mandate. Her only purpose in being in her particular leadership position, which she's probably going to get kicked out of literally today by the Republican Party, the leadership has completely abandoned her. And her only purpose is to represent a constituency that clearly is telling her to do one thing and she's doing another. She says, well, I have my principles. I think that Trump's a terrible person. He's a traitor. He tried to overthrow democracy. No, he didn't. And your moral grandstanding is a prelude probably to jumping over to become a Democrat. Go ahead and get kicked out of your position. You represent Wyoming. You think that a Democrat is going to win there? You'd get like 5% support max. Because he'd be running probably against another Democratic candidate in a primary position, probably would still lose. I love it. I love watching the liberal sellouts applaud the daughter of Dick Cheney. I love watching the liberal sellouts applauding a host of Republicans that only a few years ago they were calling Hitler. Liz Cheney, oh my God, you mean the daughter of that evil, despicable warmonger Dick Cheney? They've embraced George W. Bush. The Democratic Party doesn't realize they've become everything that the millennials castigated the Republicans for back in the 2000s and the early mid-2010s. That's what we hated about the Republicans. One of the main reasons that I would never be a Republican is because I remember George W. and Dick Cheney and Mitt Romney and all these other assorted weirdos and losers. These corrupt, cronyistic, billionaire sponges that just take money. They tell you they're going to do one thing and then they don't do it. They tell you they're going to do another thing and they do it half-assedly once they're elected. We've had this problem, and the Republicans especially, since the 1980s, really, since Reagan left. All the other Republican leadership have been an assortment of cowards or corrupt cronyists. That's the GOP of yesteryear. Trump's not. Trump told you what he was going to do and then he did it. You can disagree with what he did, but at the very least, he had balls. At the very least, he wasn't a fucking coward. This is what I like about the new reformed Republican Party. Why do you think the Democrats, 24/7, in association with the lamestream media, are doing the wall of propaganda thing? Because they're afraid of that ideology winning. They're afraid that a Republican Party that decides to say, you know what, the decorum we've been using doesn't work. We need to reform things. We're going to do it Trump's way because it actually fucking worked. We're going to stop apologizing every time someone calls us mean names. We're going to stop ignoring Marxism in schools and in culture in general. We're actually going to call it out for a change. And when we say we're going to do something, we're actually at least going to make an attempt to do it. That's totally different from the Republican Party of W. That's what I like about them. That's what a lot of other independent voters like about them. As a I'm not registered in a party. I've never been a Republican or a Democrat. I'm not going to back the Democrats. They want to steal more of my money. It looks like they're probably going to try to reheat the war in Afghanistan at the very least. The hell would I support them for? But I'm not going to support a GOP that's Liz Cheney. Fuck Liz Cheney. Cast her aside out of the party, or people like me will abandon the Republicans completely and you'll lose the midterms. That's probably why they're doing this. They realize, look, Donald Trump, at least in party, had higher approval than Ronald Reagan. It's impossible for the party structure to ignore that fact and instead try to defend Liz, I've got 25% approval, Cheney. It's just not feasible and it's just not going to happen. Good. Thankfully, the Republican Party is slowly getting healed from decades of neoconservatism. Excellent. Maybe they'll be worth voting for on a continued basis for some time to come in this current political paradigm. Maybe I'll have gray hair before the Republicans, and this is inevitable over time, get re-corrupted. Maybe the Democrats will reform at some point. I hope that they get crushed in the midterms and Pelosi and Schumer are gone. Maybe then they can get some leadership in there that actually knows what it's fucking doing. That's about all. Peace out.